Welcome back to another episode here of Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Cal Korf, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, as you know, every week here on Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which is a wide variety of subjects. So let's start off with politics, and then, of course, we'll expand out from there. First up, let's talk about the recent death of the late Senator John McCain. I will share with you my honest view about him as a politician, as an individual with respect to being a politician, and I will tell you, as a member of the media, I find it extremely hypocritical that all of a sudden the lamestream media, the lamestream mainstream media, I often call them that. In fact, I often use the term liberal, left-wing lamestream media because they often are, too often in fact. All of a sudden, if you were born today and you could instantly understand everything, you'd swear that John McCain was the greatest thing since sliced bread. You swear that he was a national hero, that the American media is just weeping buckets over the fact that he has died of brain cancer. Now, I want to be clear, it's always tragic when a person does die in general, especially of conditions like brain cancer. It's an evil, vicious disease, if you will, terrible. And my heart and sympathies do go out to the McCain family for the loss of their loved one. But don't buy for a moment, folks, the crocodile tears that the mainstream media has been busy shedding regarding his death. Because the fact is that until John McCain started opposing Donald Trump and coming out against him, the media hated Senator McCain. They hated him because he's not a liberal and he's not a Democrat. And the media overwhelmingly is Democratic-leaning, liberal, and biased in that direction. In fact, over 90%, this is a statistical fact, over 90%, I think the number's around 91 or 92%, you can do the research yourself, of all the media in Washington, D.C., and that is the, of course, capital city of the United States of America, openly claims that it leans liberal or leans left or is pro-democratic. Now imagine you're president of the United States. You're not a left-wing bleeding liberal. You're not even a Democrat. You're not an independent. You're a Republican. And you're an outsider, a very blunt one who says right or wrong what's on their mind. I'm referring to President Trump. Do you think for a minute that the media is going to love you just because you're the president of the United States? Not if you're not blessed by them, or if you're not someone like Barack Obama. And let's be blunt about it. You can Google this. The media largely gave Barack Obama a free ride when he ran for president against Senator John McCain. As a fellow journalist myself, I know a lot of people in the industry. I know a lot of famous journalists as well who are talking heads on TV. And they, of course, didn't do the due diligence concerning Barack Obama that they would have with other candidates and did with other candidates because they were in the tank for Obama. And that's just a blunt fact. And I have no problem saying that. I think the facts are there to prove it. They gave him a pass largely. And that's inexcusable. It doesn't matter what color his skin is. It doesn't matter whether he's a Democrat. It doesn't matter whether he's a Republican or a neoconservative. The media let him off the hook, and shame on them for doing it. Their integrity and their ethics has gotten steadily worse. There were a lot of things that let Obama get away with. The myth is that there wasn't a single scandal, not even one during the Obama administration. Well, let me give you one example that disproves that stupid claim, and it is stupid because it's not based on facts. It's based on ignorance, bias, or an agenda that somebody has. Remember when Obama said over 30 separate times, if you like your health care plan, no one can take it away from you. No way, no how. And that's practically a quote. And he said this, folks, over 30 different times on over 30 different occasions across the world, across the United States at least, while he was trying to sell this thing called Obamacare, which I argue has been a debacle. I know many people who have $5,000 deductibles now on their medical insurance policies, thanks, quote unquote, to Obamacare. A $5,000 medical deductible. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about this question, especially if you're a lovey-dovey Obama type. Do you have $5,000 lying around just handy to pay as a deductible for your doctor? No, probably not. If you're like most Americans and most people, even in Canada, from what I've seen in much of the world, you live from paycheck to paycheck, and you're lucky if you can do that. The middle class has been steadily shrinking for a couple of decades now. This has been true prior to, of course, even the presidency of Barack Obama. Under Barack Obama, meaning at least during his 2 terms in office, because it was 8 years, of course, the middle class reached a point where about half of Americans were roughly living at or below the poverty level. Poverty level, of course, is defined at various levels depending on the state you live in. If you make $50,000 and you live in, say, Tennessee or Kentucky, that's a lot of money. If you live in California, that doesn't even pay your babysitter for the month, so to speak. So my point is that the media has been biased. They hated John McCain when he ran for president against Barack Obama. They didn't like him when he tried running earlier as well. He was a failed candidate. And now all of a sudden, if you look at the media, they love him. It's like the greatest American hero ever has suddenly died. And of course, Trump wasn't invited to the funeral. And in what I consider to be a very revealing, interesting fact regarding John McCain and perhaps his family, even Sarah Palin, his vice presidential candidate nominee, was not invited and told to stay away, quote unquote, according to media reports, from his funeral. Now, to me, that says all we need to know about the McCains, or John McCain at least. Let's assume for a moment, and there's evidence to back this up, that there were discussions about who to invite and who not to invite at the funeral. Now, I understand that John McCain hates Donald Trump, or hated him when he was alive. Fine. That's his right to do so. On the other hand, if it were me, and I don't profess to be able to put myself exactly in the situation, if I hated somebody, I might invite them to my funeral because it would force them to say nice things about me, right? But that didn't happen. And it doesn't really matter whether Trump attended the funeral or not. It is, of course, up to the family, the McCains in this case, to decide who can come and who can't. But I find it rather interesting that Sarah Palin, a person that McCain, in his infinite wisdom, thought was credible, could be president even if something happened to him, since he wasn't a spring chicken when he ran for president. Can you imagine choosing somebody that you think is the best qualified person to be your successor, the president of the United States? Should you become the president and something happened to you, the vice president takes over. You think so highly of the person that you want all Americans to vote for them. You want her, in this case Sarah Palin, to have her finger on the nuclear button if she were to become president. So she's obviously important and credible enough to be the second most powerful figure in the free world after the president, being the vice president of the United States, but yet she's not worthy of coming to your own funeral. I'm sorry, folks, I have a problem with that. It's called hypocrisy. In fact, he later said, McCain had the nerve to say, that choosing Sarah Palin was a mistake. Well, who owns that mistake, folks? John McCain does, okay? It's not just a mistake. It is John McCain. He would make those kinds of stupid decisions. And this myth that he was a maverick. He wasn't a maverick. He voted in what one could call a rhino fashion, Republican in name only fashion, many times. And he upset a lot of hardcore Republicans, and I understand that. McCain, everybody would admit, if they're honest, had an enormous ego, and he loved to play the role of spoiler, even if it wasn't logical to do so. And, of course, he did that many times. So this bit of being a maverick and, a pioneer and a trailblazer and all that other stuff, no. There's a whole lot of fiction involved in some of these so-called factual claims. Now, I want to say one thing very clearly. When McCain ran against Obama in the year 2000, I was doing this show from Europe. And what I saw was a country divided, the United States in this case, as I've said before many times, because I believe it's true. Ever since Al Gore lost the presidency to George W. Bush, even though he won the popular vote. Fast forward now to 2016, Queen Hillary loses the election, even though all these so-called experts predicted she'd have a landslide. The New York Times predicted at one point in their ignorance that there was an over 90% chance that she would win. Well, I'm one of the few journalists who went on record and covered the whole campaign for Daily World newspaper from India, being an American over there, that predicted Trump would win. And it wasn't because I wanted him to win. I didn't support Trump. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for Hillary either. I just feel that out of 320 million people, which is the population of the United States, that if these two people were the best candidates that we can come up with out of 320 million people, the United States is in serious trouble. And I still stand by that statement. So I predicted Trump would win, not because I'm psychic or anything like that. It's because I understood the mood of the American people. I'm glad Hillary lost, but I'm not happy that Trump won. So when we come back after the commercial break, I'll give you a little bit more on John McCain and Obama, and then we'll get on to other stories. We'll be right back after this commercial announcement.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. Now, folks, we were talking about in the first segment the death and funeral of the late Senator John McCain, a longtime career politician, one of the most famous ones in the modern era. And we were talking about the hypocrisy, and it is absolutely that, of the mainstream media, who is suddenly shedding crocodile tears over his death as if they always loved him, and that just has never been the case. In fact, you must remember that when Barack Obama ran for president, John McCain was his opponent. There were Obama let's say promoters or supporters, and I knew many of them, including a best friend of mine who was hardcore Obama. They would sit there and accuse you of being racists if you didn't support Obama, if you didn't vote for them. Now, my best friend Bill Marriott didn't do that. He was smarter than that. But I certainly met several people who were Obama supporters who would even accuse me of being a racist just because I didn't support Obama, and that's nonsense. I remember very vividly, as I've talked about before on this show, being asked the question, well, Cal, why don't you want to vote for Obama? Don't you want to be part of history? Don't you want to be one of the people to elect the first black president of the United States of America? The answer is no. I don't vote for people based on their skin color, and somebody's skin color is based on genetics. Any other claim is racism. So I don't care whether their skin is purple or pink. I don't care. Again, the color of one's skin is simply genetics. You can't judge a person's intelligence by the color of their skin. That's ridiculous, and that is racism, and that is against what science has proven, and I defer to science. So I don't see race. I see people. And I've grown up in a background that thankfully has allowed me to have that perspective. And let's say that I didn't grow up in a household that taught me not to be a racist. I would say that if I ended up being one in my youth, which I never have been in my entire existence, I certainly would have learned better as I went later on over the last 17 years or so to visit and live in and or one or the other 27 different countries on several different continents. So I've been around the world. In fact, in India, there were times where I'd go months without seeing a white person. I'd be walking along by myself, minding my own business. I remember at Elante Mall, and when my mother and aunt came over to visit, there were times we'd be walking around as the only white people in the known area visible, and we get stopped by Indians who would say, hey, can I get a picture taken with you? And I'd ask them why they'd want to do that, because I'm always curious when people want to get a picture taken with at least me, because I wouldn't want a picture taken with me. I'm not important. And so I ask them, why are you doing this? And sometimes there'd be an answer like, oh, you're in the newspaper every day. I read it, Daily World, Daily Post, etc. But most of the time, by far, was because I was white. There were Indians who had never seen a white person, or what they call a Gora in their culture. Gora is a slang term for Britisher. So first thing I'd tell them is I'm not British, I'm American, and I'd remind them that America kicked Britain's butt. It was the only country who did to win its independence. We were hardcore about that, and we were right to do so, by the way, in my view. But I'd say, sure, okay, fine. I'll pose for you. You can take your picture, and then you can tell your friends, hey, I saw a white person. I kind of laugh at it. And I remember a couple other times we were up at the famous monument up in northern Punjab. Punjab is a state that crosses over into Pakistan. We were not far from the Pakistani border. And we were at this monument where the British had massacred hundreds of Indians. It was wholly disgraceful. And the military commander who massacred these innocent people was never held accountable by the British, because that's what the British did back then. They didn't care if they killed Indians. They only cared if British people were killed. So we were walking along, minding our own business. Some people came up. We were taking pictures against this monument. Then some Indians came up and started handing us their smartphones and asked if we could take a picture with their smartphones of ourselves and hand them their smartphones back. I said, no, come on, get in here. Let's just take pictures as normal people, and we did. And I've never seen these guys again. It was actually about 4 different people who did this who didn't know each other. But again, this is what I've seen around the world. I've also seen instances where they want to photograph with you because they're the only American they've ever encountered. And America has a very good reputation around the world, contrary to what left-wing liberals will tell you. So, folks, the bottom line is the media hated John McCain. They hated him up to the point that he started opposing Trump. Then all of a sudden it was, we love you. You know, it reminds me of the image of some French people that I know, and many people can tell you this. You know, there's a big anti-American sentiment often, especially in cities like Paris, where they actually look down on you in some locations in Paris. I've been there several times, if you dare to speak English. And when I run into such types, because I do know some French, I took it in high school, I'll make a point to mispronounce the words. And if there's a word like Chevrolet, I'll say Chevrolet. And, of course, I know that upsets some French language militant types, but I just kind of like to poke fun at them when they're coming down on me for speaking my own native language. I happen to be in their country, and whether they like to admit it or not, English, more people speak English in the world than they ever will French. And I just don't like that type of nationalism, if you will. So I kind of like to have fun with it a bit and remind people who feel that way that this is not the way to be. And so what happened is the lamestream media backed Barack Obama. They were in the tank for him, essentially. He got away with a lot of stuff just because he was black. And that is the truth. And there's a lot of evidence to support that up, to back it up, and that was wrong. I felt that because McCain chose Sarah Palin, he pretty much handed the election to Barack Obama. That, combined with the fact that even McCain admitted he was clueless where it concerned economics, and he's right about that, at least he was honest there. But that wasn't what the American voter wanted to hear, although it was the truth. When the economy was tanking in the real estate bubble that burst, which caused a global financial crisis. So Obama got into office due to a combination of a couple of unique circumstances that happened to coincide with his presidency. And let's be honest, Obama was a better tactician and overall politician, strategic-wise, versus John McCain, who I argue was such an arrogant egotist and a short-sighted, I think unqualified to be president, that he chooses a running mate called Sarah Palin, just because he wanted to counter the novel angle that the Democrats were promoting at the time, which was, look at our black candidate. Well, again, whenever you stress somebody's race, whenever you stress their religion, whenever you stress their sex in politics and you're voting for them or pushing them because of those factors, that's wrong. It should always be about the issues, nothing more, nothing less, because at the end of the day, it's going to be policy, how you handle it or don't handle it, and about issues that is ultimately going to matter. Now, that's all I have to say about the issue of John McCain, but I also want to share one more story, which has nothing to do with this, but it is an indictment again, a smoking gun, if you will, against the liberal, mainstream media. Yes, that's a lot of words to use, but that's a good way to describe them. If you check today, New York Times, lead story. Guess what, folks? NBC, the NBC, which always likes to tell you, we only tell you the truth, unlike Fox, that's their claim, especially people like Rachel Maddow, who's been exposed on the show. Guess what they're guilty of, according to the New York Times? So this is going to be tough for NBC to try to say, oh, it's only Fox making this allegation. No, it's not. It's the friggin' New York Times, okay? And they have their own issues, believe me. But guess what they're accused of? Major story today, folks. They're accused of covering up information they knew about the now disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein and his problem of sexually assaulting and harassing women, of which he's on trial now for doing that. According to Ronan Farrow, who's a top investigative journalist, they had the dirt on Weinstein, but censored and ordered that the coverage of this be covered up. Yeah, You can read it. It's in today's New York Times. I would encourage you to read the story and then think again about the integrity issues of some of these liberal left-leaning stations like NBC, MSNBC, and so on. They have an agenda, folks. It's anything but Trump, and that's wrong because it's not only against Trump, it's against anybody who disagrees with them, and that's where I have to draw a line as a journalist. Nobody's perfect. You're going to agree to disagree with people. You're going to also agree with them. You're going to outright disagree with them. There's nothing wrong with that depending on the issue. But how dare you say that you stand for the truth and that and that Fox has a credibility problem when you yourselves are now busted on the front page of the New York Times for doing stuff that even Fox doesn't get accused of on a consistent basis. In fact, CNN, another problem child network, pro-Democratic Party, of course. Remember, some of their correspondents and analysts actually cheated for the Democrats, like Donna Brazell. She fed Hillary Clinton in advance questions to so-called town hall meetings to help her presidency. And then, of course, when she resigns in disgrace, after denying it at first and lying about that, she then becomes the head of the Democratic National Party. You gotta love those ethics. Anyway, CNN was busted publishing at least 2 fake news stories this week, one of which they haven't corrected yet or bothered to retract. I would say that's typical of CNN today. They don't call them the Comedy News Network and some other less than stellar terms for nothing today. They're not the CNN that I remember that used to be very respectable when I, of course, was on their top talk show at the time over Kennedy's assassination called Larry King Live, when it used to be on their network. All right, we'll be back after this commercial break and we'll change the subject.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, of course, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, enough about Senator John McCain. He has passed away of brain cancer, which is a terrible disease to die from. Not taking that away from anybody. I empathize with anybody who suffers from that condition and, of course, ends up passing away because of it. It's a cruel way to die. But, folks, once again, please don't fall for the mainstream media crocodile tears where all of a sudden McCain is a hero in their mind when in reality they hated him until he started opposing Donald Trump. Then suddenly he could do no wrong. All right, let's leave that behind now, and let's now switch subjects. Recently, as everybody knows, Paul Manafort, who was Donald Trump's campaign manager in the final stretch, only in the final stretch, of his successful presidential campaign, which defeated Queen Hillary Clinton, Manafort has now been found guilty, and his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has pled guilty to 10 different criminal charges. This isn't over, folks, but as an investigative journalist and someone who has followed this for a couple of years now, and the history of the Russian mafia, Russian influence in politics, these type of activities for many years now, when I found out that Manafort was going to be charged by the special prosecutor and special counsel, rather, the first thought that came to my mind, and I've written about this in Daily World newspaper, it's nothing new. The first thought I had was, what took them so long? What took them so long? You see, the fact is, folks, and this is something that MSNBC isn't going to tell you, or anyone in the mainstream media, but the U.S. government, especially Robert Mueller, and he's a very competent prosecutor, very successful man. He doesn't mess around, and God bless him for that. He has had the goods. The U.S. government has had the goods, and other governments have had the goods on Paul Manafort for many years. This is nothing new. So my question is, why did they wait so long to finally do something? And isn't it interesting that they should finally decide to do something when Manafort happens to be one of Trump's key guys? And, of course, he's no longer involved in the Trump administration. He was dismissed. So my view is this. If the poet and world-famous playwright William Shakespeare were alive today, he might very well pen a line that reads, quote, Trump to impeach or not to impeach, that is the question, unquote. And if Shakespeare were to comment on the current unprecedented series of scandals that are now engulfing the Trump White House, despite its constant denials to the contrary, which are not credible, this is perhaps what he might say. To impeach or not to impeach Trump? That is the question. Well, since the founding of the United States, just 2 previous presidents have been impeached, and that's in a track record of roughly 320 years. They were Andrew Johnson in the year 1868, and in more recent times it was Democrat Bill Clinton. Now, while many people wrongly think that former Republican President Richard Nixon was impeached, he wasn't. Instead, Nixon resigned as president in disgrace, and like a coward, he never faced an impeachment hearing over his Watergate scandal, which Nixon, of course, was deeply involved in. He wasn't innocent. He knew about the illegal break-in into the Democratic National Party headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, and he was perfectly fine with it. Now, what is impeachment? Impeachment is the process, according to the Constitution, and Wikipedia gives a nice summary of it. Impeachment is the process by which a legislative body, this would be Congress or the Senate, formally levels charges against a high official of government. It's not reserved just for the president, in other words. Impeachment does not necessarily mean removal from office. It is only a formal statement of charges, akin to an indictment in criminal law, and is thus only the first step towards removal from office. It depends on the seriousness of the crimes. In the case of Bill Clinton, for example, he was impeached in Congress, and then the Senate did not enforce it. And, of course, this was along party lines. The Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and the Congress at that time, the lower house, House of Representatives, was controlled by the Republicans. So, of course, they voted to impeach him. Now, I will tell you that impeachment laws are nothing new. They've existed for a long time. The very concept of it is not something unique to the United States. The USA didn't invent it. In fact, there are other countries like Brazil, Ireland, India, the Philippines, Russia, South Korea. They all have impeachment laws. Now, let's talk about former FBI Director Mueller. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller was appointed as special prosecutor by the current Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein after then current FBI Director James Comey, this was Mueller's successor, was unceremoniously fired by President Trump. One must remember that the standard term for office to be director of the FBI is usually 10 years, and either the director serves that 10 years. Sometimes they serve a little longer than 10 years, like Mueller did. He was director of the FBI for about 12 years. And then during that second renewal of their 10-year term in office, they usually appoint a successor, and that successor, of course, was Comey. So in a formal order issued on May 17, 2017, the Deputy Attorney General, or Deputy Director of the FBI, Rosenstein, he wrote that by virtue of the authority vested in me as acting Attorney General, not Assistant Director of the FBI, he appointed Robert Mueller as the special counsel. And you can easily look on the internet to find his order appointing Mueller as the special counsel. Now, a lot of people think that Mueller's mandate is to look into any possible collusion or corruption in the politics, basically the Trump campaign or his minions cutting a deal with Russia, a quid pro quo to help rig the election and so on. Yeah, he's looking into all that stuff, let's be clear. But there's a certain extra area of authority that Mueller has been given, and basically it says that he is also authorized, and this is a quote, to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. So let's say, I'm going to explain what this means. Let's say that your name is John Smith, and you helped the Trump campaign, and you had some contacts with some Russians, or let's say you didn't, but you committed some federal crimes, some felonies, and we're talking again federal crimes, not state crimes, while you were doing this. Or let's say you committed the crimes years before, 10 years before. Mueller can still come after you, even if you were not involved with the Trump campaign at the time, and what you were doing had nothing to do with Trump, and it dates back so many years that Trump himself never even knew or thought he was going to run for president. He can still get you. He has that much power. And that is exactly what he's done with Manafort. It is interesting to see the typical left-wing, liberal, lamestream media, how they've handled this. They're delighted, practically orgasmic, that Mueller has nailed Manafort. Another Trump guy busted. Yeah, long live freedom and democracy, right? Again, it's not that simple. What Manafort has been indicted and convicted for is nothing to do with Trump. Absolutely nothing. Instead, it has to do with money laundering that occurred as long as 10 to 12 years ago. It had nothing to do with the presidential race. It had nothing to do with any collusion at all. And because Manafort dodged his taxes and laundered money and didn't declare millions of dollars he was paid by Putin's cronies, okay, and I'll get into that in a moment, he's now going to face some time in prison. Okay, fine. I have no problem with money launderers facing the music, serving time for the crimes they committed. Nothing wrong with that at all. But again, I have to ask the question, what took them so long when the fact is that in 2006, you can do the math, Manafort's activities were first flagged in a classified U.S. State Department memo when the intelligence agencies of other countries, such as Lithuania, went ahead and informed the U.S. government that, hey, one of your guys, Paul Manafort, who was a very well-known political operative, lobbyist, and consultant, he dates back to the time of Ronald Reagan, worked on Reagan's campaign. He even helped former Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos and his campaign imaging, which is funny because he was a dictator. It's not like he had any real competition. But what happened is that in 2005, Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmetov went ahead and helped put Viktor Yanukovych into power in Ukraine as the president. Manafort was hired to do everything from write his speeches to help run his campaign, and he was paid handsomely for it, at least $10 million, perhaps as much as $20 million. And what happened is that this guy won. He was later overthrown in a popular uprising, which upset Russian President Vladimir Putin. It caused Putin to then invade the Crimea illegally under international law. They seized it. They held a referendum. And Russia now owns Crimea. They are not going to give it back. And nothing Barack Obama could do could reverse that. So the fact is the U.S. government has had the goods on Manafort going back over a decade. But yet all of a sudden they waited this long to act on him. And I find that timing rather curious. What was Mueller doing all these years? What was his successor, Comey, doing all these years? When they knew about Manafort, they knew what he was doing. It was nothing new. So what took him so long to act? You'd have to ask them. We'll be back after this commercial break.
TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. As I say every episode, I'm going to repeat myself again, probably do this every episode as long as I feel this way. Time goes by so fast when I'm yapping away here on this show. We're already in the fourth segment now. Let's wrap this up with what time we have. Now, as I was saying, it is a fact that the USA, Israeli, and European intelligence agencies, they monitor everything. I'm not the only one who's reported on this. This is not surprising since it's their job to do this. Now, as I've reported previously many times in both Daily Post and Daily World newspaper, the secret programs that the U.S. government uses to spy on much of the world, especially Americans, there's two code names for them. They're top secret programs. The first is known as Bull Run, and it's run by the National Security Agency, and its British counterpart, Edgehill, that's the British term for their equivalent. They are responsible for breaking encryption schemes. One way that the British and Americans spy on communications worldwide is via another top secret program called Tempora, Tempora, and Tempora monitors all global communications traffic that is transmitted via underground cables, which are located on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. So when Manafort later became Trump's campaign manager, eavesdropping continued on him, and it was expanded, especially after Russian intelligence had successfully phished Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta's email account, and then they hacked computers at the Democratic National Party. So to believe that Trump was not spied on, which is what pro-Obama types want you to believe, nor those in close association with him, this would be those around Trump, people like Manafort, is to accept the outrageous and just ridiculous idea that billions of dollars of spying equipment and that at least 700 intelligence and law enforcement officials were not doing their jobs. And that's just ridiculous. They were doing their jobs. And in the waning days of the Obama administration and the early days of the Trump administration, word leaked out that Obama had indeed spied on Trump and that special orders were signed. The White House was in the loop to keep tabs on Trump. So it's not surprising that Manafort was convicted for income tax evasion and money laundering. The intelligence community has essentially always had the goods on Manafort. But again, the question I have to ask folks as a journalist, as a fellow American, is why law enforcement waited until now to raid his home and then put him on trial. I find that to be rather curious and inexcusable. In other words, they could have moved against Manafort before he even joined the Trump campaign, okay? But they didn't, all right? And why they didn't do it when Mueller was director of the FBI from the year 2001 to the year 2013, so just a few years into Mueller's term as FBI director, all of a sudden Manafort comes on the radar, they're spying on him, but they don't act, and I just don't understand that. And I want to emphasize here that I'm not bashing Mueller. I don't buy the White House line, and lie it is that he's not credible or that this is some kind of witch hunt. No, it's not. If Trump had not fired Comey, Mueller wouldn't be special counsel today. So it's Donald Trump's fault that he did this. He didn't have to do it, but he chose to do it. And as with anything that anybody chooses to do, right or wrong, there are always consequences. Now, I have to tell you that there is a long, convoluted history of twisted involvement between the Russian mafia, the Russian government, and the so-called justice departments of the United States at the state and federal levels. It's so bad that it's kind of heartbreaking, okay? I'm going to give you a short summary of it before we end the show here. Again, the fact that Trump has always had longtime connections to the Russians is no secret. In his book, The Art of the Deal, Trump claimed he had tried to build a hotel located across from the Kremlin when Russia was a communist dictatorship. Now, this would be back during the days of the former USSR, which thankfully no longer exists. In fact, Trump wrote in his book, "I was impressed with the ambition of the Soviet officials to make a deal, yet while the Kremlin paid all of Trump's expenses for his trip to Moscow, nothing happened. While no hotels were built, this doesn't mean that Trump's involvement with Russia was now over. If anything, it was just beginning. In fact, the USA's and other countries spying on Trump and his then new project, Trump Tower, I will tell you as a journalist having covered this issue, began to kick into high gear in late 1998 when Russia officially defaulted on its $40 billion debt that it owed. Now, during this economic crisis, the Russian mafia and various oligarchs actually moved some $1.3 trillion out of Russia, out of their country, and they invested lots of their cash, diamonds, and gold into real estate around the world. Trump Tower, which began construction in October of 1998, look at that timing, folks, profited from Russia's economic collapse. Now, by 2004, a disproportionately large number of Russians, Ukrainians, and Kazakhstanis, these would be people from Kazakhstan, had purchased properties in Trump Tower by the time it opened in 2001. These three nationalities accounted for as much as a third, folks, of everything that was sold from the 74th to the 83rd floors. Now, predictably, several of these owners were criminals. A lot of people who were rich who took money out of Russia, got that money through illegal means, and they were criminals. Now, this doesn't prove that Trump automatically knew this or even personally knew many of these people, but the intelligence community and law enforcement certainly knew who these people were. In fact, Trump made a point to allow what are called anonymous owner purchases. His real estate development was one of only two projects in the state of New York that permitted this type of lax rule at the time. Now, I'm going to give you just two examples real quickly with the remaining time of the show here of criminals who operated out of Trump Tower. The first, there is the case of Edward Nekhtaloff, who laundered money by using diamonds and gold. He was in partnership with the Colombian mafia, and he had emigrated to the USA from the former Soviet Union in 1973. Now, after being busted in a secret sting operation called Operation Meltdown by the U.S. government, which targeted money laundering and mafia operatives, Nekhtaloff was murdered on the streets of New York when a hitman fired a bullet into the back of his head, then pumped him 2 more times at point-blank range. Now, whatever secrets Nekhtaloff knew, they went with him to his grave. He had purchased a suite in Trump Tower on its 79th floor, which is 1 floor below, believe it or not, Trump's eventual campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway. Oh boy, what a small world it is. And Conway, of course, currently serves as Trump as the counselor to the president. Now, there were other criminal associations as well, even joint partnerships. The case of Russian Felix Sater is an even more infamous example. It's a very real one. You can look it up. That's Felix, F-E-L-I-X, last name Sater, S-A-T-E-R. Now, Sater was a partner with Trump in fraudulent real estate dealings through his company Bayrock. To avoid serving any prison time, Sater cut a secret deal with the FBI and CIA, believe it or not, to help them prosecute Russian mafia figures and covertly recover dangerous American-made Stinger missiles that had fallen into the hands of terrorists in Afghanistan. Now, that would be folks like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Sater even purportedly provided a lead that produced the mobile phone number of Al-Qaeda's co-founder Osama bin Laden's courier, which allowed the CIA to eventually track him, pending the location down of Osama bin Laden, who was then killed in a historic nighttime raid in Pakistan by CIA operatives and U.S. Navy SEAL commandos. Now, Sater still remains, as of this show, as of today, still protected by the U.S. government. Barack Obama's former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, helped renew the order to keep key files about Sater's cooperation with the U.S. government classified after a judge alerted her to the fact that his records were going to be released. So there has been this twisted, convoluted relationship, joined at the hip at times, between the Russian mafia and the U.S. government. This goes back many decades. It has involved people like Rudy Giuliani when he was a prosecutor in New York, to Cuomo, to every major politician who has come and gone on the scene. This involves Eric Holder. It's involved Loretta Lynch. It's involved James Comey. It's involved FBI Director Mueller. They've all been involved. They've all cut deals. And it is the type of thing that makes a person who's interested in what one might call pure justice, it just drives them nuts. How can we sit there as a country and let the Russian mafia get away with doing certain things while at the same time we partner with them when it's in our best interest to do so? That's a very gray area. And in fact, here's a curveball that is being now thrown on this that concerns Hillary Clinton. Remember that there was information released by Comey and the FBI that Hillary Clinton's private email server, which was a rogue server, had been compromised. In other words, it had been hacked. Well, I said at the time that China did it. It turns out that that was correct. China did it. China not only hacked Hillary Clinton's server, it wasn't the Russians. The Chinese did it successfully. There was a company locally in the U.S. that was a spy front operation for the Communist Chinese. And after her server was compromised, probably anywhere from 8 to 12 CIA people stationed in Asia that were reporting on China were either imprisoned or executed. I think Hillary Clinton should be reinvestigated by a impartial panel over this, because the person who decided not to act on this was Peter Strzok, the now disgraced and fired FBI agent. You can thank him for doing nothing about Communist Chinese spying and hacking of Hillary Clinton's server, and for not charging her with crimes of which she is certainly guilty of. So I support a new investigation, free of politics, to hold Hillary Clinton and her minions responsible for their corruption and breaking of the laws. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back next week with another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.